Hello everyone and welcome. Today we're talking about budgeting every dollar that you have. This is also known as zero-based budgeting. Now once you grasp the concept of zero-based budgeting is pretty straightforward, but getting there can take a little bit of time. Even Dave Ramsey claims that it takes 3 months to get used to this process. And you may be thinking, how the heck am I going to budget every single dollar and then track all my spending to make sure everything balances out? My goal in this video is to explain as simply as possible this end-to-end budgeting process. Budgeting every single dollar for me has had a tremendous impact on my finances. I used to buy coffee every single day at Starbucks, and I also used to buy lunch at the office pretty frequently. I recognized after a while that I was spending a lot of money in those two areas, and I figured I could put that money elsewhere where I found more value. So now I make coffee every day and I pack a lunch for work. I'm not saying for you that you're going to stop buying coffee or you can never buy lunch again. I'm just showing that once you put a magnifying glass on your spending, you start to see where your dollars are really going, and you start to think, is that coffee or that lunch having that great of an impact on my life? Or could I take those dollars and put them somewhere more valuable? How each person implements this is going to look different because everyone has a different financial situation. But at the end of the day, you'll recognize that this becomes more of a lifestyle change than simply a budgeting process. When you put that magnifying glass on your budget and you start to see everything that you're spending, it really gets you asking questions of yourself on what you're spending your dollars on. For me, buying coffee every day really didn't make sense, and I didn't think about it all that much when I'd go in every day and I'd just swipe my card. It just happened because I never tracked it. Once I tracked it, I recognized, hey, I'm spending $25 or more every week on coffee. That's $100 a month. Once I started tracking it, I recognized I could put $100 a month towards something way more valuable than just drinking coffee. And by the way, I'm still drinking coffee, I'm just making it at home. So over time, you do start to see how this changes your life and how you make your financial decisions. I'm not trying to pitch a lifestyle change to you. I'm just saying, once you start really tracking your spending, you start to see areas that you're overspending in and you make your own changes. And to be honest, I can't imagine going back to a process where I'm not budgeting every dollar. So with that, let's just dive into a quick example to walk through what this looks like. You just got paid and say you have $1,500 sitting in your checking account. But now, with your new budgeting process, you're going to set up your budget. And you know that between today and your next paycheck, you're going to have certain expenses come due. Let's just say, for example, rent is $1,000, utilities is $200, groceries $200, and gas $100. So for the next 2 weeks, you've budgeted $1,500 between all your different categories. So now you're at $0. You have $1,500 in your bank account, but you have $1,500 accounted for, so it balances out. This is known as giving every dollar a job. Fast forward 1 week. You just paid rent, your utilities came due, and you paid $100 in groceries and you needed $50 in gas. So now, old you may be freaking out because you only have $150 sitting in your checking account, and you think, how the heck did I just go from $1,500 to $150? I'm going to run out of money soon. Where's my emergency fund? But now with this budgeting process, you know you still have enough money to get you to your next paycheck because you only need to spend $100 on groceries and $50 on gas. Fast forward another week, you've now spent another $100 on groceries and another $50 on gas, so technically speaking, your bank account is at zero and your budget is down to having nothing left, but you've now made it to your next paycheck. So you get your next paycheck in and you start mapping out your future expenses. The idea here is whatever money is sitting in your checking account is being accounted for and it has a job. Any dollars that don't have a job burn a hole in your pocket, so to speak. You'll end up spending the dollars because you don't have them set towards a goal. So at a high level, this may make sense. You have the dollars in your checking account, you've accounted for them in your budget, and as you go through life, you recognize that everything balances out. But how the heck does this work in real life? How am I supposed to track every transaction? Because in reality, it's not as simple as just rent, utilities, groceries, and gas. You may be buying things every day at smaller dollar amounts that have maybe $1.66 for a pack of gum or maybe whatever, but it's a lot harder in real life to track than my example. And that's where a budgeting tool comes into place. Dave Ramsey has a tool called EveryDollar, but I use a tool called YNAB. It's YNAB, and it stands for You Need a Budget. I think conceptually they both get to the same point, so you can use either one, but this will tremendously help you in your budgeting process. One distinction with these budgeting tools versus a tool like Mint is that Mint is like a top-down approach. You just have your big bucketed items like rent and groceries and whatnot, but it doesn't account for everyday transactions. We'll get to the transactions in a moment, but I do want to make that distinction that there's certain tools that I'll say have a bottom-up approach that account for everything versus a tool like Mint or just a spreadsheet that is a top-down approach and it's just big bucketed items that are your different categories. So in EveryDollar or in YNAB or whatever tool you are using, you want to go in and you want to set up your budget. Very similar to what I just explained by setting up your rent, your utilities, so on and so forth. You add all your categories. And another category is the like button. You can go ahead and drop a like. That tells YouTube that this is at least half decent content to share with others. For me, I may have 20 or 30 categories that I'm accounting for, so it's a little bit more complex than just the 4 items I noted, but that was just our example. But consider your fixed expenses, variable expenses, one-off, you may have an emergency fund, whatever it is, you want to account for them. An easy way to start would be to take your checking account and look through the last month and see what is every item in here and what category could we put this towards. When you start with some of these tools, they have pre-built categories to get you started to give you an idea of what you should be budgeting for, but you should personalize it to make it your own. Okay, so once you've done this, you have your checking account, which just has some random number in it because it's whatever number is sitting in your checking account today, but this budget is now giving meaning to that number. Because prior to doing this, you look at your checking account and you'd have no idea, is this going to get me 2 weeks into the future? Is this enough money to get me 3 weeks? You may not be able to answer those questions until you set up your budget. So now you have your bank account that's holding all your cash, and on the other end, you have your budget, which is accounting for every single dollar that you have. And again, make sure you're budgeting every single dollar so it doesn't burn a hole in your pocket. So this next part is what's going to tie everything together to keep your bank and your budget balanced. And that is logging your transactions. This is going to be the most routine process, but it's going to take a while to get used to. Because right now, you may be just handing cash or swiping a card without really thinking about it. But now if you have to log the transaction, it really makes you proactively think about what you're spending. Also, you just simply have to log the transaction. It's very easy to forget. Even now, I've been doing this process for some time. I'll walk out of the grocery store and a week later think, oh, I forgot to log this transaction. By logging transactions as they happen, it keeps everything balanced and working properly. Personally, when I started doing this, I used to just log the transactions on the weekends. I would go throughout the week, I would use my debit card, spend wherever I needed to spend, knowing I had budgeted for all the items, and then on Saturdays, I'd log into my checking account, log into my budgeting tool, and make sure everything matched and log the transactions at that point in time. What I found was there's a lot of transactions that may have happened over the week, and it was pretty grueling to go through once a week and logging a week's worth of transactions. So what I found to be easier is actually using the budgeting tools app to log the transaction at the time that I actually make the purchase. So for example, here, I'm just gonna open up my phone and I'm gonna log $50 for gas. All I have to do in the app is hit a plus icon to add a new transaction. I have to say, who is the payee or who am I paying? In this case, it's going to be the gas station, whatever gas station you're paying. And then what is the dollar amount? And then what account is it coming from? And in this case, it's going to come from my checking account. Once I save this transaction, it will reflect on my budget that $50 was just spent on gas. And from our example, we had $100 budgeted towards gas every week, and I just spent $50. So now it knows that I'm down to $50 in my gas budget or in my gas category. So now if I log into my checking account, $50 was just paid to the gas station. And if I log into my budget, it shows that $50 was also paid to the gas station. So everything balances out. And that's the idea. As you go through life, you simply log the transactions as they've happened. And if you've budgeted for them, you know, I have $100 to spend on groceries every week. I'm in the grocery store, I get $100 worth of items, and I go and check out, and then I log that transaction. my checking account is going to show that $100 just disappeared to the grocery store, but at the same time, $100 disappears from my budget, reflecting that transaction. One side tip here that has helped me tremendously, like this has been probably the best part of the tool, is for credit cards. I have a category for credit cards because I pay the credit card every month. And if I swipe my credit card to get gas, it takes $50, and instead of saying that it's paying the grocery store, it actually moves $50 from my gas category into my credit card category. So fast forward 1 month, when my credit card bill comes due, I have those $50 sitting there waiting to pay for the gas that I spent the prior month. It's just simply moving the money around depending on the category. If it's coming directly out of my checking account, then it comes directly out and pays whoever I'm buying from. But if I pay it on a credit card, it just moves the money from whatever budgeted category to my credit card category. That has saved me tremendously in trying to figure out how do I account for my credit card spending. Okay, so now you're sitting here thinking, I get it. I have my checking account, I have my budget. They're balanced, they match each other, so we're good. And then as I go through life, I'm gonna log my transactions so that it keeps everything in sync. Totally makes sense. But why is this so difficult? It's so difficult because now we're going to break away from this being a process to a lifestyle. This is a lifestyle or mindset change to actually sit down the first of the month or whatever day, set up your budget for the month, and then as you go through life, log those transactions to make sure you're keeping everything in sync. It takes time and effort, and even Dave Ramsey has mentioned that it takes 3 months to get used to this. And this is where I'm going to be transparent and say that I started this for a while. I got a couple months in and I couldn't figure it out and I ditched it. And about 5 months later, my wife and I came back and recognized, no, we really need this. It's very useful. We really need to just buckle down and learn how to make this work. Because at first, we got the process, but the lifestyle just didn't follow. And so it totally fell apart. So that's where you have to understand the technical process and how you're keeping everything aligned, but then also implementing it in your life. So that means every day you have to think, if I'm buying something, log the transaction. My advice, do it now when you make the purchase, because you're going to forget about it 2 weeks from now when you look back at your bank statement. This happens to me several times. I'll buy $44 worth of stuff at Walmart. 2 weeks from now, I think, is that a grocery category or is I buying something else? Logging it at the point of the purchase really helps alleviate this, but it is a whole mindset change and a whole lifestyle change. So for my wife and I, we had to embrace this, not just the process, but the lifestyle change and commit. And once you commit, things become a bit clearer over time and after you get over that learning curve. So now you have the whole picture. You have your bank, you have your budget, you have the transactions and logging them. You recognize that this is a whole lifestyle change and that yes, this is a simple process, maybe not simple, but pretty straightforward in how it works. But again, it's just change. No one likes change. I don't like change. Again, I started this process and then dropped it and then came back again. So just adapting to that change is probably the biggest hurdle to accomplishing this process. But once you get through the learning curve and you've adapted, you recognize the value and it's not super time consuming. Again, you set up your budget for the month one time a month. And this for me was a way that I was able to knock out all of my credit card debt, and I've knocked out about 80 to 90% of my student loans. And this was a huge tool that helped me get to that point. I hope this video helped you in a straightforward way how this whole budgeting process works, what it looks like day to day, and why it can be so challenging to implement. If I missed anything, go ahead and comment below. I'll be sure to address that potentially in a future video. If you did like it, I ask that you please like and subscribe.